Okay, so the ego binds you in this box. Well, now, how does the ego bind you in this box? Now, I'm going to show you. We have 5 senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. 5 senses. Okay? So this box here, this inner box, is created by the 5 senses. Well, what I've learned and what I've come to understand is 5 is a strange number, considering God uses a pattern of 7. 7. Well, when you study the 5 senses, it's defined as a means by which to gain knowledge. Everything that you know, you have seen it, heard it, smelt it, tasted it, or touched it. Well, as I was led in my path, and I'm sharing this with people because for me, as I've learned this, it's been profound. Okay, and there is a lot that I do not know. I'm not claiming any kind of superiority. I am no different than anybody else. And it's really amazing as to what I have learned. But what I found out is God uses a pattern of 7. So here we only 5, so we're missing 2. What I found out was the 6th sense is intuition. It is an internal knowing. The definition of intuition is also a means by which to gain knowledge. I mean, if I'm somewhere and my intuition, my gut, starts to tell me, I shouldn't be here, I should leave, or this is not right, or I've got a bad feeling, and if I leave and something does happen, I gained knowledge. It was a means by which to gain knowledge. So intuition is the 6th sense. Now, people that believe in intuition trust it 100%. Other people limit just to these 5. If they can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, or feel it, it doesn't exist. That is the cube. Now, the 7th is imagination. Imagination is also defined as a means by which to gain knowledge. If a man came in here and he set a machine down on my table and he says, "Wow, look at this, it makes coffee. It heats up water and it makes coffee." I can use my divine spark and I can imagine how could such a machine do that. So now I have gained knowledge through the imagination. Jesus speaks and says, "Those who have ears to hear and eyes to see." intuition are the ears of the heart. Imagination is the eyes of the heart. Not everyone believes in intuition and the imagination. So therefore, everybody standing there that day had... Okay, sorry, my video recorder went out, so I'm having to start over a bit. Okay, so back into where I'm at now. So really, we have 7 senses. We have 5 that are of the physical world. Okay? Now, Jesus says, "My Father's kingdom is not of this world." It means you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, and you can't touch it. If you study the 5 senses and the world, and what you will find out is anything that is outside of the 5 senses is considered to be of the imagination. So Jesus says, "My Father's kingdom is not of this world. If it were so, my servants would fight for me." Meaning, it's not of this world, not those 5 senses. Okay? All right. What happens is, and let me back up a second here. In Genesis, Adam and Eve and the fruit. Some say it's an apple, some say it's a fig. I think it's a fig. Okay, because there is a figment of the imagination. All right. So what I'm getting to, the fruit was pleasing to the eye. It was pleasing to the eye. This eye is the imagination. When Adam and Eve eat of the fruit, their eyes... I am not an artist. That wasn't a gift. Their eyes were open. You see, but the fruit was pleasing to the eye before they ate it. And then their eyes were open. Now, symbolically, and this is just where I'm gonna jump around a little bit with you here. These eyes are symbolic, okay, of the 2 columns, which is Jachin and Boaz. You see, and here is the duality again, the opposites of each other. Because, see, you got to realize, one eye sees one thing, and the other eye sees something completely different. It's conflicting in the brain. That's why we have left brain, which is very analytical, very factual. Then there is right brain, which is very artistic and free-flowing and spiritual, okay? But they conflict each other. It's a duality. It's like a judgment. And what sits in the middle of this is judgment, okay? And this judgment is going right back to this flaming sword that turns in every direction. Because when he turns in every direction, it's the judgment. And there's a funny thing, a sword starts out as an iron rod. And then it's pounded and sharpened. Okay? So this judgment. Now, in my way of understanding, This is dividing God. Because here's something that's going to really blow you away. You're going to like it, you're not going to like it, but I don't see how you can dispute it. This is our understanding of God. You see, and I'm going back to Alpha and Omega. In the beginning was darkness, and he said, "Let there be light," and it was, and he divided the light from the dark. But isn't God all of it? You see, how can there be anything outside of God? So, if we look at Satan here, Satan has no imagination. So, he steals our imagination. He robs us. And this is where we call it the ego. You see, if Satan had any imagination, he would create his own world. But he is an angel. He was not given imagination. This is in my weird world. And I mean, you know, and that's okay. Some of you can agree with it, some of you can't, and that's all right, because what I'm showing you here is after a whole lot of spiritual work, a whole lot of reflecting within. And maybe what I'm showing some people here is you're not ready for it, and that's where you're not going to get these answers the way I'm giving them, but I think as you work through, you'll get them. Satan has no imagination. You see, when Jesus was on the mountaintop for 40 days and 40 nights, he was denying the body. He was starving out the ego. The ego was offering him kingdoms, silver, gold, all the things that the ego would love to have. You see, and he told Jesus to turn the stone into bread. And Jesus says, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God." Well, Satan has no imagination. So bread is all he can think of. You see, but with man, Jesus, I'm not comparing, saying Jesus is man, man is Jesus, but Jesus is Jesus. You see, every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God, well, that would be strawberries, watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe, almonds, grapes, pears, peaches, steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, macaroni cheese pie. All of these different things that are creations of the imagination. You see, you or I could never imagine anything that Father had not already imagined. You see, that's how big the imagination is. My heaven is not like your heaven. You imagine it different than I do. So, I mean, you really need to look at this imagination thing. There's 20 scriptures in the Bible that deals with imagination, and they're very clear because he's talking about the ego, the imagination of the ego, and that's the difference between if the heart is controlling the imagination or if the mind is, because the mind is the ego. Now, I'm going to jump back here because something I found that was very interesting that sort of correlates in with all of this.